Hi, this is Amy from Out of Step Dyeworks, and I'm going to be showing you how to knit with silk hankies, no spinning required. First I have to get rid of this cat here. So when you open up your kit, you're going to have a stack of silk hankies like this. They can stick to your hands pretty bad, so you might want to do a scrub or exfoliate or something like that. It can be a little bit irritating. This kind of fiber preparation is called silk hankies, but it's not a woven fabric for blowing your nose on. There are stacks of silk cocoons that were stretched out over a rectangular frame, and they can be separated and knit with as is, like we're going to do, or it can be spun into yarn. So let's take a closer look at those layers. For this project, we'll need 8 separate lengths of yarn for the 8 petals of the flower. If you can look at your stack and identify at least 8 individual layers, that'll give you an idea of how thin each layer will need to be. So once you identify an individual layer, go ahead and pull it completely off the stack. It's going to be sheer in the middle if you successfully pulled off just one layer, and it'll be uneven and kind of splotchy and thicker in some parts. That's all completely fine. So this is what one layer looks like by itself separated off the stack. First step in making yarn out of this is to pull it into a loop. You're going to stick your fingers completely through the center of the hanky and start pulling everything towards the edges to make one big loop. As you do this, if you find thicker spots, you can specifically pull those out thinner. That's called drafting. It's a spinning term. This is the same process you'd be using if you were going to spin these hankies, but we're not going to add any twist after pulling it out into yarn, so it's not really spinning. To make sure I have the length of yarn needed to knit one of the petals of the flower in my pattern, I stretched out my fiber until it was about 2.5 times the length from my wrist to my shoulder. If you hold your fiber with your arm outstretched and it's pretty droopy, you probably have enough yardage for a petal if your gauge is close to mine on the size 5 needles that the pattern calls for. Once your loop is the correct length, pick a point and completely pull it apart to make one long length of yarn. We'll be knitting from the yarn just like this without adding any additional twist. The silk here is pretty strong. It has a long staple length. It takes some effort to pull it apart. It's not going to come apart accidentally as we knit with it. It's a lot easier to knit from the silk hankies than from unspun wool roving. If you like, you can wind your yarn into a little nest to keep it out of your way as you begin knitting with it. Okay, on to the knitting portion. I call for a long tail cast on in this pattern. So I'm going to cast on 4 stitches, and the yarn can hold up to this kind of treatment pretty well. You don't need to worry about it drifting apart as you do your cast on. You can use any needles you want for this project. Since the petals are so small, I'm using some interchangeable tips here, but it really doesn't matter what kind you use. I call for a size US 5 for this project. So I'm going to purl back, and then I'll show you how to work the increases in case you'd like to see that. I do call for directional increases in this pattern, and the make one right can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. This yarn is really fun to work with. Once you get it in your hands, it feels really soft, and you can really see the shine. And it's a big difference between handling it as yarn and once you start knitting with it, it just feels really cool. So here's an increase row. I'm going to knit the first stitch, and then I'm going to do a make one right between the first and the second stitch. So first you need to find the bar between the first and second stitches of the previous row. And although we're going to be putting it on our left-hand needle, sometimes it helps to pick it up with a right-hand needle and then place it on the left-hand needle. The left-hand needle is going to go from back to front so that the running yarn is sitting backwards from a normal stitch. Then you'll knit it through the front to avoid getting a hole in your increase. So that's a make one right, that's a right-leaning increase. So I'll knit to the end of the row and then do a make one left, which is a more common increase that is left leaning. So I'll be inserting the tip of the needle from front to back and then knitting it through the back loop. I have a little trick for getting the right hand needle tip into the back loop, put it in the front, and then roll it over the needle just like that. And then I knit that through the back loop and knit the final stitch of the row. So if you follow the pattern using those increases, they'll be slanting towards the right on the right hand side of the petal and towards the left on the other side. If you like, you can do all the increases as make one left or any other preferred increase, but it'll be perfectly symmetrical if you do the paired directional increases as I've indicated in the pattern. You got to see Rocky earlier in the video, so I'll show you this little outtake with Ziva. Cats love the silk hankies for some reason.